play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew and Dave here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to the special series of This Is Not a Test. We're trying something new here. It's totally new. So we need your feedback as we go along. We want to know what you think of all of it. Essentially what we're doing here is a bit of a narrative campaign. So it's somewhat along the traditional lines of how I've done narrative campaigns in the past, where there's a story and I'm the GM and we have a player or players. In this case, we have one player, which will be Dave. So I get to manipulate his fate and the fate of his warband. But where we're going to depart from the normal framework that we do is in two major ways. One, this isn't Warhammer 40k. This is a game called This Is Not a Test by Joseph McGuire, or Joey as he goes by email and on Facebook and everything. And I met Joey at Adepticon, and I've talked to him by email, and he's actually provided us with a coupon code that you can use to get a discount on his stuff on his website. And so I'm going to put that in the description below what that coupon code is, because off the top of my head, I don't remember. I think it's MWGTNT 2017, but I forgot to look it up before we started filming. So that'll be...
Now it's in my head.
Yeah, I know. It'll be in the description below. And heck, actually, I'll get Rob to put it right here. So this is really important. If you are interested in playing This Is Not a Test, make sure you head over to World End Publishing, which will also be in the description, and purchase. You can actually get the PDF. He's got a hardcover of the rulebook. He's got a PDF of the rulebook. We've got some miniatures there. A lot of the miniatures you're going to see us using aren't just World End Publishing, because he doesn't have a full range. They come from all sorts of different lines, and I'm not going to remember all of them. I know there's Brigade, I know there's Reaper, I know there's Warlord Games. I think we're even using some Infinity models from Corvus Belli. Yeah, that guy, that's right. Roy North is an Infinity model. This guy right here. That's an Ariadne model. So we have all sorts of different ones. I think we have some from Brother Vinny as well. He does the post-apocalyptic stuff. But essentially, This Is Not a Test is a post-apocalyptic game. It has a very similar environment to the Fallout franchise. I'll just say it, it borrows heavily from that without actually using their IP. And it has a very Necromunda-esque type of campaign system. But the game itself is not really like Necromunda. It's not like 40k. It's a D10-based game with stats. You roll a D10, you add your stats, and you try to get some sort of target number. And so it's a lot of fun, though. It's a skirmish-sized game. I'm not going to try to tell you too much about what it is. You can just kind of watch this. But if you love post-apocalyptic stuff, if you love Fallout, and if you love role-playing games, then I think you're going to enjoy this series. So that's the first part. This is where this is diverging. This is not Warhammer 40k. And the second part, I guess there's three parts where we're diverging, actually. The second part that we're diverging is that there's going to be a sequence of games that we're playing here. The first part of every game is going to be a role-playing session. And so Dave and I are actually going to role-play. Now Dave, unlike typical role-playing experiences where each player controls one player character, Dave has to go through a bit of a split personality kind of thing, and he's got to role play all of his characters. And so we've come up with names, and which we'll talk about. We'll actually give the backgrounds, a quick background of each of the guys in this first session. You're going to meet the entire warband and understand why they are together. So we're going to do that. We're going to have a little role-playing session, and that might be 5 minutes long. It might be half an hour long. I have no idea. We're honestly just jumping into this filming. I've got story prepared. I've got characters prepared. I know what's going to happen, but I have no idea how this is going to go. So this should be interesting to see how this works out. And then as soon as he gets into a combat encounter, then we switch over to a typical battle report playing using the This Is Not a Test rules. Now to play the role-playing aspect, if there are any stat tests to do, we're actually going to use the This Is Not a Test system because it's a very elegant system for it. It's very simple. If I say take a strength test, target 10, you roll a d10, you add your strength, and you got to get 10 or higher. It's as simple as that. It's a really straightforward system, so it allows us to have this kind of loose role-playing structure where we're going to focus more on the role-playing, because the moment we hit combat, like I said, we go into the battle report, which has the more detailed miniatures game. The third way that this is going to diverge is that this campaign is totally free. There are no parts of this campaign which will be in the MiniWarGaming vault. Not that our vault members don't deserve to have it, but we wanted to depart from it because it's something new, and so we want to give everybody a chance to see it and to experience it so we can get the right amount of feedback about what you like. And so we're going to actually post this up. Normally I try to film an entire narrative campaign before we start posting it, but we're actually going to kind of post this as it gets filmed, and that way we can get real-time feedback before we film maybe our next game. Although we might have filmed our next game by the time this one comes out, just because of some delays in editing and rendering and all of that. But we're just going to put this out. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the same day every week. It's just going to come out when it comes out. So that way your feedback, we can incorporate it into future games as well. So we really do want to hear from you. And you can give ideas for the story, you can give ideas for the structure, and just let us know if you like it or not, and that can help us to shape future content as well. So I know I've talked a long time at the beginning of this video, but I thought it was important to give all that framework for what it is we're doing. One other thing I should mention is that I'm going to be attempting in our first game to be using a program on my iPad called Sirenscapes, and I'll put a link in the description to that as well. Sirenscapes is a paid program which allows, it's basically a soundboard, which is not adequate to describe it. Like I can do fun things like, now these ones are kind of silly, but we can have like that kind of stuff, or. So I got a speaker right here actually, and we're gonna see how that mixes in with the sound, because I know it's just our mics picking it up, but it's more to create this ambience. More importantly, what it actually does is you can have all these presets where it's like, okay, you're in the desert and you're in a storm, so we click this preset and it gives the ambient noise. Or you're about to do a battle, so you click this button and you can hear the skirmishes of battle and maybe some battle music. So Sirenscapes is a paid service. You can see it below. This both fantasy and sci-fi. And they give permission for people to use it commercially as long as they tell people about it. So this is us telling people about it. Sirenscapes.com, I believe. Description below. But it's a really cool tool that we're going to try out. So let us know if you like it, if it adds to it, if it takes away from it. Because it's definitely awesome to use in your own role-playing sessions, but I'm not sure how it's going to convey on video, because we are going to add post-production music and sound to this whole thing as well. So let us know any feedback, and we will be sure to take that in. So
this is actually very nostalgic for me.
Playing role-playing games?
Matt and I, when we first became friends, even though I've known you since I was 5 years old, when I was 11, we played our first role-playing game together, and it was fighting fantasy.
Just one-on-one.
And it was one-on-one.
Yeah. We eventually kind of created a group.
Yeah.
But we'd often play one-on-one because that's all we could do. So we didn't have time.
It's bringing back a lot of memories.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and so hopefully this can be too. Now, to give a little background, this is not a test. It's based in a post-apocalyptic world where there's been a nuclear war, and then some time has passed. I think about 100 to 150 years, and so there are people that have reestablished themselves, but still the majority of, at least where we are, which is in the tri-state wasteland, which is kind of in the Pennsylvania, DC, Jersey area, I think is where it is. It's still pretty wastelandish. There's certain pockets of civilizations that have kind of banded together, but there's still huge areas of wasteland. There's areas that you just don't want to go to because there might be mutants roaming there, or cannibals roaming there, or raiders everywhere. So it's a very Wild West feel that everybody's got a gun in their hip because they've got to protect themselves. And so that is the environment that we're in. There can be a mixture of desert. There is still greenery that has regrown over the past 150 years, but everybody's just trying to survive. And of course, as we all know, radiation from nuclear bombs doesn't kill. It actually creates mutations that makes rats bigger and people have a second head sprout, or whatever it happens to be, because that's science. Because radiation doesn't just,
It sounds like science.
It doesn't mutate your cells and give you cancer. It makes you a superhero or turns you into a zombie.
That's right.
So we have rad zombies in here, which are pretty awesome. And so that's the environment that we're in. And so let's talk about the backstory of this warband here. We're not going to go into the characters yet, because I want to talk about why they are even together to begin with. You see, there was this man, and his name was Galen Jan. And this man lived in one of the cities, one of the reestablished cities. And cities there still their population isn't nearly as big as what they used to be. So you'd look at thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. And he got tired of the corruption there, because there was various mobs and little gangs that would spread up, and they were trying to control and have vie over control of the city and its resources. There's good people too, of course, but it was hard to make an honest living. And he got tired of all that corruption. And he was a very charismatic man. And he decided that he wanted to set out and travel a good distance away from all the corruption and establish another settlement somewhere. He wanted to scout out an area and establish his own settlement where he could create a better life for people. It would still be rough. You're still going to try to grow crops in the wasteland. You're still going to have to fend off raiders. He knows that once you leave the cities, the further away you get, the more you deal with, wild animals and mutated people and raiding warbands. And so he started to talk around town, and he found as many people as he could who also agreed with him. And he actually managed to find quite a few, almost upwards of 100 people in this city were convinced by his preaching, I guess. It's not really religious, but it's more like what he was trying to convince them to do. And so there was this great exodus from this city. And this was years ago. This is many years ago. And they trekked out into the wasteland. It was tough. Some of them died. They got attacked by raiders more than once. But thankfully, he made sure that when they left, that there was enough warriors amongst them. But he still needed children and all the other stuff, all the supplies. And so he made sure they were well armed. And it's a large group of people. Typically, raiders roam in bands of maybe a dozen, and they pick off caravans that only have a few people. But this is a large group, so it was a lot harder for raiders or wild animals to really make a dent in them. But they did get attacked somewhat, and they did lose a few people. But overall, they were kept safe just by the sheer fact of how big they were. And after they traveled quite far, quite a distance away, they found this valley, I want to say, amongst a bunch of mountains. And so this was perfect, because there used to be a town there of some sort. It hasn't been lived in forever. They had to clear out some of the wildlife that was there, but it provided a really good hole that they could defend, because there was only one really good entrance into it. Of course, if you were determined, you could climb over the mountains and get there, but you're not going to get a big raider warband able to do that. They would have to enter in through that choke point in the first part. So this is perfect, because it was a nice large valley, it was a nice large area that they were able to establish a settlement there and start to establish their lives. And it was tough. They got attacked, they would still get attacked by raiders. They'd still have to fend off the rad zombies. There's actually a mine in one of the mountains that they slowly started to clear out, because it was just full of mutants and zombies and other things, because it just went on for miles. And so they haven't cleared it all out, but they've managed to go in there and even use the mines to some degree and mine some of the materials from that, and set up their farms and rebuild some of the buildings and establish a good life in relation to what you can have there's still plenty of people. There was all the kind of politics that you would imagine. There's some people who were sad that they left, that then they wanted to go back, but they realized that they couldn't go back on their own because they were so far away, they wouldn't be able to make it there. And maybe occasionally some of them would leave, but overall people followed him. They followed Galen, and they trusted him, and he was a good leader and helped them to establish this. And so years pass, and the only contact they have with the outside world, besides the occasional raider warband testing to see if they can actually penetrate the defenses, which they never could, was the Biscuit Box Caravan. Now, Biscuit Box, of course, is everybody knows Biscuit Box Caravan. It's the big company, and they're the trade caravans that travel all over the place. They have headquarters all over the tri-state wasteland. And so they would occasionally come, probably once a month, maybe once every 2 months, and trade with the settlement. That's about the only outside contact that Galen really wanted to have, because he still needed some supplies. And they would trade some of the things that they would mine, or some of the excess food that they did, or some of the workmanship that they worked on, and trade with these caravans for other medical supplies, things that they couldn't create on their own, or that they couldn't scavenge, or they couldn't go too far out to scavenge these things, and so they would trade with them. So this was an important link. And occasionally you'd have, a kid who would grow up and he'd be like, I don't want to be here anymore. So he'd join the Biscuit Box Caravan and he'd leave with them. But overall, the society they created stayed, and it even grew a little bit as they had more kids. However, one day, they started to have problems with supplies, because they just, there's only so much you can get of the land. And he realized that he needed to start sending out scavenging parties further and further away from where they were, because they started to run out of stuff in the nearby places, the nearby towns that nobody lived in, but there were still supplies in the general store or in whatever happens to be. And so they had to go out further and further, and that was they started to run into more and more resistance of all the different challenges you have out in the wasteland. And he himself, Galen, would actually go out. He wouldn't just sit back and send people. He wasn't that kind of person. He would go out himself. And then one day, about 2 months ago, he goes out with a group to go and scavenge. and he's gone. They don't come back. They don't come back at the appointed time. And everybody starts to worry. They don't know where he is or where the rest of them are. And it's over a week later that he comes crawling back into camp, all bloodied and injured, barely makes it back alive. And they nurse him back to health, and he's totally shaken up. And it turns out that they were attacked by raiders, and they weren't able to defend themselves enough, and all of them were killed, and he managed to escape just barely with his life. He had the wounds to prove it, the bullet wounds and the knife cuts and everything else, and he fended off what he could, but unfortunately the people he was out with were killed, and he came back. And this shook him up, and everybody noticed that there was this instant change in his personality, that he lost all his confidence, and he seemed rattled by this, almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder. And at first people were sympathetic because they really liked him, but as the weeks went on and his directions became more erratic and they didn't make as much sense, and he seemed very troubled, like he just seemed overly troubled by what he had seen. And so there was starting to be talk of replacing him as a leader. But now, present day, so that this has been happening. He's still the current leader, even though people are starting to wonder if he's still physically and mentally able to be that. Your scouts return, and they find out that one of the local settlements, or one of the local towns that you had cleared out before, all of a sudden has this big infestation of these giant rats. And it needs to be cleared out. And it's actually quite close to where you are, so if you don't clear them out, then it could cause a big issue for the settlement, because the giant rats have a tendency to tunnel, which means they can bypass your security and get right into the settlements and start to attack people or eat your crops or your livestock and everything else like that. So Galen calls together some of his warriors. So this is where we're going to step in now. So this is our backstory is now officially over. We are now entered into present day. So hopefully that was enough time for you to kind of get this idea. In fact, I'm going to turn on our sound for our settlement. So we are in this settlement, in this valley. There's a sound of fires going, and you can hear kind of people talking in the background and just going about their daily work. When Galen calls this meeting, and he's asked for his best warriors to come, all of his best warriors to come so they can go and clear out this menace. And so of course the first person he calls is Richard BR. So Dave, tell us a little bit about Richard BR.
Well, Richard BR is the pseudo group leader of, I actually don't know.
There's no name for this, really.
All I know is the story that I made up for him, so I'm just going to describe him.
Yeah, go for it.
He is very stealthy, and he's kind of like an escape artist. He likes to wield a couple weapons, a couple blades. He's very strong. Yes, he is very strong, and he is kind of a loner.
He's a leader because
he has a strong personality.
Yeah, not because he's actually really good at
he's
leading.
not really good at leading at all, in fact, but since he's really sure of himself and in his own capabilities, people gravitate to that. So it's kind of his confidence in himself that people are attracted to, which makes him a de facto leader.
Yeah, exactly. He's strong. He's the strongest, he's probably the fastest, and he's proven himself, especially when it comes to pest control. He's definitely really good. He's good at, he knows how to kill an animal.
Yeah, he can figure out their blind spots, and he can kill them quite easily.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So he's the quasi-leader of the warband because simply he's just a sheer force of will, not because he's actually any good at leading. But
he's actually kind of a crappy leader because he's quite selfish.
Yeah. So now, in order for him to go, though, his half-brother has to come along, and his name is. Why don't you tell us about his half-brother?
Okay. Well, Willis.
And we're gonna have pictures of these showing while you're talking about them,
okay.
So you don't have to worry about what you're showing.
All right. This is just helping me. So,
That's fine.
So Willis is Richard BR's half-brother. He's his older brother. And he made a promise to their mother that he would always protect him, but he can't ever tell him that because of pride, and he would never allow it to happen. And so when they're in a fight, that's his number one priority over anything else, is protecting Richard BR. But other than that, he's kind of like the leader because of his wisdom and his knowledge. You know, people are like, hey, that actually makes a lot of sense. And then he's like, well, no, you just got to refer to Rich BR.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, in game, Richard BR doesn't have any leadership skills, and Willis does.
Yes.
So you'll see that he'll actually be. He's got the motivator skill, which gives bonuses to people's activations when they're within 6 inches of him. Whereas Richard BR, he couldn't care less if they were close or not. They don't get any bonuses.
Basically, it's whatever Richard BR wants to do, he does. And then Willis, he kind of rallies everyone around him to follow Richard because he wants to protect Richard. So
and of course, in game, if Richard ever gets into some trouble, and obviously that's subjective, and Willis can see that, then he is obligated to go and try to help Richard BR.
he must.
Yeah, he
even
must.
if it means leaving others behind, even if
Or-
it means he puts himself in danger.
Exactly.
Whatever it could be.
He must. And he's very strong. He's actually able to carry a rifle, which is typically a two-handed weapon. He can hold it one-handed and operate it that way. So he can hold that while still holding his knife. So he's pretty good that way. Mm-hmm. And then, now, as these two are getting ready to go, of course they want to gather the best warriors. So they're going to call up Roy north. Mm-hmm. So why don't we have the conversation between Richard BR? So Gale says, Richard, I need our best warriors to go and clear out this rat infestation. And obviously your brother Willis has to go along with you. Who else will you take with you?
It's going to have to be the big guy, Roy North.
Ah, yes, Roy.
He doesn't care about dying.
No, or shaving, or bathing.
Personal hygiene is not a thing. It's not a concept to him.
Yeah, you know what? And Roy's dog Kenny will be quite useful. All right, call over Roy then. Get him to join.
Roy, come here. What do you want, Captain? You gotta come with us. We gotta clear out some rats. Kenny, bring Kenny too, because he can sniff them out for us. Put a leash on that thing. Although I like dogs. In fact, I kind of wish he was mine. He's my dog! Leave him alone! Just come along with us. Not because I necessarily want you to, because you stink so much. But we need you because you have a broadsword and you can kill things.
Roy is pretty much WYSIWYG. He's this big guy with a big sword, and he hits hard and smells worse. and that's it. Not that that's a general trait for people wearing a kilt.
He's wearing a
But
kilt.
this
Let's
guy-
just say he has not changed his kilt in a very long time.
And does not wear anything underneath it, which is much to the chagrin of everybody. And he has a problem with women. Not that he has a problem with women, but he actually can't deal with them.
That's his weakness.
That's his weakness, right? Because
Yeah.
we try to give everybody a weakness, and his weakness is that he can't deal with women. And in game, he is actually not allowed to attack a woman.
No.
Unless he can't recognize it as a woman, like it's in full power armor or some mutated
Right.
woman, and he's just so mutated. Like obviously a rad zombie that used to be a woman, if it's not obvious that it was a woman, then he'll be fine. He can defend himself against them, but...
I just can't do it. Oh!
And if we ever get into role-playing scenarios where there's a woman, don't send him to do the bartering or the discussing, because he'll just give them whatever they want.
Cater to every whim.
Yeah, it's like, oh lassie, I'll give you whatever you want.
Yes. What do you want? Oh, I'll kill 10 dragons for you.
Now, as you're having this conversation, Beverly comes along, and he insists to join. Beverly, well, tell us about Beverly. Actually, let's have the conversation as Beverly shows up.
Whoa, where are you guys up to? You're gonna fight some rats. I think that's amazing. Wow. Well, can I come? Yeah, let me come. Yeah, I can fight. Let me fight.
Well, he can pick him off from a mile away with his pistol.
Yeah, I sure can. Because I'm amazing at that. And I'm the best.
What does Richard BR say to that?
You're such a dork. Right, fine, come along, we need some extra shots.
So Beverly is interesting because he has a weakness, which is called bad luck. And so the first time he rolls a critical, which is rolling a 10, it actually counts as a fumble. But for all of his bravado, he actually is a really good shot. He has the rangefinder skill, which gives him plus 6 inches to the range of his weapons. So his pistols, which are normally 12 inches, are actually 18 inches long, which is almost the same as a rifle. So he has marksmanship, he has, I think it's called marksman, where he basically ignores one level of cover. And so he actually is a good shot, just don't roll a critical for him.
Marksman.
Because the very first time he rolls a critical, unfortunately, it will count as a fumble instead. So he's an obvious choice. Now, Richard has another best buddy that he doesn't know why he keeps bringing along, but he always somehow survives even though he shouldn't. And that's Jerry. Why don't you Richard's going to call Jerry along, so have Richard call Jerry along.
Jerry, come on, come along.
I want to come along. What are we doing? Yeah, we're gonna get some rats, and yeah, we're gonna put them up on the spit after. And I'm gonna feed them to Beverly, because Beverly needs some meat on his bones. When I was a lad just like him, oh man, I had so much muscle on this awesome body. Oh.
This guy's like 1,000 years old. I think he was there pre-war. At least that's what Beverly tells him all the time.
I got my armor on, which makes me the same armor as you guys without armor. That's fine.
That's right. So he has the weakness of being a little more feeble. So he has -1 to his defense, but he gets to count as being equipped with riot armor, which gives him +1 defense. So he has the same defense of everybody else because of his armor. But he's a survivor. He has a survivalist skill, which gives him bonuses to any survival rolls, and he's very resourceful, which helps him scavenge better.
Better believe it. I've seen everything. I know it. I see you. I've seen you before.
And then Richard has to bring along the kid. Because the kid, even though he has little man syndrome, meaning that anybody who's taller than him, which is everybody, he thinks he's better than them and has to stand up to them. He actually has a genetic disorder that's kept him short all his life. So he's about 4'6"-ish, maybe only 4 feet. And so he actually looks like a kid. And everybody just calls him the kid. He even calls himself the kid because he likes the fact that in combat people underestimate him. But in social face-to-face encounters, if you're at least an inch taller than him, he always has to prove himself. And he carries around a toy train, which is actually a wagon full of grenades and Molotov cocktails. And so why don't you have him call over the kid?
Hey kid, come with us.
Yeah, what do you want? Yeah, I'm gonna come along and I'm gonna do this. Yeah, I'll make sure that you guys are safe because I'm the best with my train, with all of my explosives in it. Without me, you would all die because you all suck. Especially you, Beverly. What do you think you're so awesome with your pistol and your marksman? You throw a grenade right at the barrel. See what happens then. Cool guy, Mr. Luck.
And then an old lady comes along, not necessarily a warrior, but she can't let you guys go without her coming along. So why don't you tell us about this? Roleplay her coming in and forcing herself into the group.
Well, what have we got here? Oh, look at all you boys. You need attention right away. I'm gonna come here and make sure that you're all safe. Because Mama doesn't like to see any injuries on the battlefield.
So this is Betty.
This is Betty.
Tell us about Betty.
Well, Betty is, she is a medic, and she's like the den mother of the group. She believes that she's the one in control of the group because she doesn't think that something's safe. She'll definitely put her foot down and make sure that things don't happen the way she doesn't want them to happen.
But she's one of the few people that Richard BR will actually
Listen
to because
yeah.
it's like, yes, Ma.
Yeah.
Yes, Ma Ripson.
If you say so, Betty. Yeah. But yeah.
Don't call me Betty. Call me Ma. I'm your Ma.
But no, she's kind of like a farmer turned nurse, medic, combat survivalist.
She has a pretty sad background because
It's
she came
incredibly
with the group.
sad.
Yeah, she came with the group and left the city. Do you remember the reason for that?
Yeah, well, her kids died. Yeah, so that's incredibly tragic. And so she views all of these guys as her kids. So that's why she has a soft spot for all of them, including Beverly. And she doesn't want...
Especially Beverly.
Because she sees he's the most troubled. So she doesn't want him to... she doesn't want anyone to get hurt. Like even Roy, even though he has the most horrible hygiene, she's always on him about using the oxy pads and whatever they can find.
Well, she's one of the few women that he can talk to.
That's true, because he sees her like Mom.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not like
Yeah,
there's no love interest possibilities there. 'Cause
There's no
she's
infatuation.
like twice his age,
Yeah.
or 3 times his age.
She's pretty
maybe.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like 70, but she's in incredible Olympic shape for a 70-year-old
In
who can
fact,
keep up in battle.
there is one another unfortunate kind of dark side to her, and that is because of the way that she, and I'm not going to go into all the details because it's kind of brutal, the way that she witnessed her husband and kids get killed has kind of flipped the switch in her head. She's got a bit of a mental illness that at any point she could kind of snap and becomes kind of crazed. And so she actually has 2 profiles. And every time one of these guys goes down in combat, then Dave has to roll a metal test for her, and or a will test, I guess. And if she fails it, then she switches over to her crazed self. And this is where she stops being a medic. Her movement goes up, her melee goes up, her range goes down, her strength goes up, her defense goes down, and she gains an extra wound, which is a big deal because most of these guys only have 1 wound. And she goes from being a medic to being this frenzied, quick jumping, she pulls out her big syringe and her hacksaw that she uses for surgery, and she's and just runs into combat, get off my kids! And for the rest of the game, she's that way until the end of the game. Then they can calm her down, or she gets taken out of action, then she calms down. So it should be interesting to see how quickly she snaps when your guys go down, because it's possible that she'll never snap, that she keeps it under control.
It is possible, but it's possible she'll snap every game.
Yeah,
we don't know.
We don't know. That's all the dice.
I'll role play that as it happens. I don't want to lose my voice right now because
Yeah,
probably will happen.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's one more member who kind of forces his way in, and actually the Galen insists that he goes along, and that is Charles Wentworth. Charles is not much of a combatant, but what he is he's a gifted technician or mechanic. So he's really good at helping maintain the weapons of the group and all that. So why don't you tell us about Charles Wentworth?
Well, Charles, he's kind of like the rules Nazi as well. He's the moral compass of the group. If there's anything questionable,
kind of.
Like
he thinks he's the moral
not
compass.
in the right way, but in the right by the book way.
Right.
So if there's
everything's black and white.
everything
to him.
is extremely black and white with him, and he very often disagrees with Richard BR. And goes along because he doesn't want to place himself in danger by being the only one left in the group behind. He wants to keep safe at the same time, but he very often disagrees with all of the leadership decisions. He always has something to say because there's just nothing really is ever black and white in this very gray world which he lives in.
Yeah, a very brown world.
Yeah.
Lots of dust.
I see you guys are going to attack some rats in a hole. I must accompany you just to make sure that you do not do anything wrong or make deals with any groups that I disagree with. And I will follow you and keep my close eye on you, especially you, Richard VR. You think you are the leader, you are not the leader, you were never born to lead.
But he is very clever. So he's got a bonus to any intelligence rolls. He is a gunsmith and a maintainer, so he's good at maintaining his weapons and the group's weapons.
So he is needed in the group.
It's going to be important because if you come across weapons, we're not going to be using 100% of this is not a test campaign system because it's designed for multiple warbands, kind of like Necromunda, where you just kind of after each game build up. This one we're going to do it more like a role-playing game where you only buy stuff when you're talking to somebody you can buy stuff from, and after each game you might scavenge stuff, but he'll be the one that'll be you'll check his skills to see if you can actually use the thing that you find, or if it's just going to be scrap. So basically, yeah, you find this beaten up rifle, and then he'll check it and use his gunsmith skill, and if he passes the gunsmith skill, then you get to use that rifle. And so that'll be very important, especially if you're going to find like relics and things that are much more useful. That'll be harder for him to do, but he'll be the key point of that group. So if he's ever not in the group, then it's going to be much harder for you to scavenge materials, because even though you can find stuff, it won't necessarily be in working condition. So he is actually going to be very pivotal to the group. Just in combat he's actually not too bad. He's got a machine pistol, which means it's a pistol that can fire more than once per turn. And he's not bad at range. He is one of your elites, so, and him and Willis actually start with 2 wounds instead of just 1. So I've actually kind of already pre-upgraded some of the guys just to get them where we want to start. But for the most part, everybody is pretty fragile, as you're going to see in the actual games. So our motley crew has been assembled. This is pretty much, there's nobody else that really would be a good warrior to bring. You got to leave 1 or 2 back home to guard, but you won't be gone very long. Like it's only a half a day's journey to get to where the rats are, and so you can be there. If you clear them out quick enough, you can be back before, or maybe you'll have to stay over by 1 night and come back a day later. So you should be okay.
So which one are you going to stay behind?
No, none of these guys are staying behind. You have a couple more guys that are staying behind.
Oh,
that are not
part
joining
of
your
this group.
warband. Yeah, this is the warband that's going to clear up the rats. And so it's time for them to head off. Do 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 do. Oh wait, it's the wrong game.
Wrong universe.
Wrong universe. So you've taken whatever materials you can, which we've already put into your equipment, your weapons, any grenades you start with. You have enough provisions. We're just going to assume, because we are going to be doing upkeep for your warband, but we're going to assume that you have enough food to get there and back, so we don't have to mark that, so you'll be maintained for this time. In the future, we'll actually be maintaining how much food you have on the longer treks. But since this is just a short one away from your settlement, you just pack enough provisions. Betty will make sure you got enough food. She's made some stew and she's put it into some. She found not too long ago this relic from pre-war time that can keep stew in a sealed container. Right? Isn't that awesome? Because right now they just like put it in wooden stuff or rotted stuff. But she found this thing made of a material that's kind of flexible and it's a little translucent. And it has a lid, and when you lift the lid, it's like it goes when you open the lid, and it seals everything in. So she has a relic, and it says on the top there was some wording, but it's all kind of faded away, and so all you see is toup. So toup is what she calls it. So it's her toup full of stew. So she's got a big toup of stew, and she's got a couple of these, and that's enough to kind of feed you for the day. And then you got some extra provisions, and you can always eat the dog.
I brought some toup, boys.
Got my toup of stew. So yeah, the dog will just kind of eat whatever. So off we go into the desert. It's not too far away, and we only have light winds to really deal with, so it's not really going to slow you down. So there's our light winds. Once again, I'm not sure how well the microphones are going to pick this up, and that's fine because we're going
It
to
might have to be closer if you want.
Well, I want it off camera. That's why I put it all the way over there.
Probably up to your dice and it won't be shown.
Good enough. You can see it a bit. So you're heading off into the desert, and of course, yeah, you kind of have your. This is their organization. He's always ahead. The kid actually likes to stay ahead too. He's got the ranger skill just like him. So he likes to trek along with his little pudgy legs. Well, actually, they're not pudgy, but they're little. He doesn't eat enough for them to get pudgy.
Choo choo.
Yeah, he tries not to give away the position of Richard BR. He actually does respect the guy, even though he always has to prove himself. It's his little man syndrome. So you head off into the desert. Takes you a few hours to get there. The weather's not too bad. There's a bit of light wind kind of biting into you a little bit, but nothing that you're not used to. Although it is nice usually where you are in your settlement because it protects you from a lot of the winds and a lot of the storms. So nobody really likes to go out in this, but you gotta sometimes. And as we get closer and closer to the town where you're heading, you can start to see more buildings as you're getting there. Well, it's dilapidated, of course. As you pass a gas station that's long been out of gas, you guys have taken every last bit of petro out of there, and it's been run down. And you remember that place. Actually, you've been there lots of times. It's a marker. You know exactly where you are. You're only like 3 hours away right now. When you pass through a tiny little town that's been mostly knocked over by storms, but there's still some skeletons of buildings. And cautiously always keeping an eye out for whatever might be there. The winds have died down a little bit, so your visibility is pretty good. So if somebody's hiding in the buildings, well, Richard BR would notice them. And as he continues forward. Actually, why don't we do a quick perception check? It's Richard who's out front, so you'd have to do it for him. So let's roll a d10 for me and tell me what you get. Add your medal for Richard.
0 is a crit.
0 is a 10, which is a crit. So he crits his perception. And so he's very confident as you're passing through this one town that he sees a few little skitters and he spots a rad roach or two, but they just quickly burrow back underground and there's not enough of them to really be a threat. And so as he passes through all the buildings, he perceptibly hides behind doors and all of that and finds nothing. So that crit, you're very sure of that. He's very sure of himself and he calls everybody through and you continue on your way.
Nothing to see here.
No, nothing to be scavenged either. There's you guys of this place is, except unless you're looking for like rotted wood, there's really nothing to find here. So you head back out a little bit into the wasteland. Between towns, of course, the wind always picks up a bit because there's less to block it. And for a couple more hours, you trek. Charles is always complaining. He doesn't like the sand getting into his nice clothes.
Could not have picked a better day to go on this trek to find rats who will always be there, even tomorrow. Again, strike one out of the 3 that I will for sure see today.
Yeah, his clothes are always surprisingly pristine. I think he uses more than his ration of water in order to make that happen, but he's determined to be properly dressed. And so the sand getting into his stuff and into his shoes, he can't help but complain about.
A man must be properly dressed, even if he is to die.
Very true. And y'all can always hear the barks of Kenny as he's looking around. But he never strays too far from Roy, as he's very loyal to him. And he always can find Roy. I don't know why he's able to pick him out from a mile away, but there's something about Roy that makes it really easy for Kenny to always return to him exactly where he is. Why? Because he stinks to high heaven, and he has his own kind of stench. Like if it was bottled, it'd be like a ode to Roy. Sounds very fancy until you smell it, and it smells like sewer.
Like a mossy sweat.
Yeah, it's take like sweat, but not like sweat on like a bodybuilder, but like sweat on like a really hairy, dirty person. And you take that sweat off, and you put it in a bottle, and then you go like find a dead skunk, and you kind of take a bit of its fur, mix that up, stick it in a bottle, and maybe a little bit of dirt, but that dirt has to be from a mushroom, and a little bit of cow manure, and you put it in there, and that would smell better than Roy. So yeah, so it's really easy to pick them up from a distance away.
If that was Steve, I'd start throwing up right now.
So you're near the town now. The winds died down because there's actually a mountain range on your left and some hills that kind of block out the mountains. And so the noise is pretty light. And so what would you like to do as you approach the location of where the scouts have picked out where the rats are?
So the kid goes up to Richard.
Hey, Richard, do you see anything? I got my flash grenade here. Throw it out and blind whatever's there. Just let me know and I'll do it.
I'll just stay back, kid. I don't see anything. I don't see a threat. I see no reason not to advance.
All right, roll another perception check. So roll a d10, add your metal. Tell me what you get.
13.
13, okay. Unfortunately, I don't have a preset for this one, so give me 2 seconds. So as Richard enters the town, these guys are not far behind him. And the kid, as much as Richard's like, stay back, of course he can't help that. So he like goes and finds his own little hole to crawl through. Because that's why he has Ranger, because he's so small and stealthy that he's able to get up there. But Richard, as he gets closer, he can spot movement off in the distance. If I can find it. You can hear some scratches. And sure enough, you can see some movement in one of the buildings. And with his high perception, he rolled pretty well. He rolled a 13 there. That he's able to see a group of rats in one of the buildings. And then, as he's looking at them, he notices out of his periphery, another one of the buildings has some rats as well. And so as he approaches, he can see that there's a few places that are infested with rats. So not just one, but it looks like there's 3 different locations that the rats are kind of crawling around in these buildings as you get ready to approach it. What would you like to do?
3 buildings.
Yeah. So you're in a bit of a town now. These guys are just outside of it. They've held back as Richard goes and scouts, as he always does. And so he notices there's 3 separate buildings within like a 1-block radius that seem to have these rats. And so he finds his higher point. He climbs up a bit and he can see exactly where they are.
So Richard is going to go by himself towards the closest building with rats in it.
And
soon thereafter, his brother Willis, half-brother Willis, is going to go, hold up here. Oh, okay, we're going to split up into 2 groups, and I'm going to go with Richard and Kenny, you with the other group, and Beverly, you with the other group too. Let's see here, Jerry, you with me, and Mama, you with me, and
Charles, or Charlie, like he likes to call him.
Charlie.
Bugs the heck out of him.
Charlie, you with the other group, and I don't know what the kid is. The kid can meet up with whoever he wants later on.
Okay, so you head off into the town,
Yep.
and we go boop, 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 into a battle. So now we're going to go into the battle report, which will be at the link below. So go ahead and click that. Remember, it's free. It's right there. We might even have an annotation right here. I'm not sure. There will be places for you to click on to go and watch the battle report now. So go check it out.